Until his latest appointment, Ambassador Tangara held various positions within his government of the Gambia from 2010 to 2013, serving as Minister for Higher Education, Research, Science and Technology, as well as Minister for Foreign Affairs, International Cooperation and Gambians Abroad. He also briefly served as Minister for Fisheries, Water Resources and National Assembly's matters. Previously, he served as coordinator of the National Authorizing Office Support Unit for European Union funded programs and projects in the Gambia, a position he held from 2008 to 2010. Dr. Tangara holds a Doctor of Philosophy in Social Sciences from the Université de Limoges in France, with 2 master's degrees from the same university and the Université Catholique de Louvain in Belgium.
Thank you very much, Louise. Your Excellencies, ambassadors who are here present, our brothers from Turkey who purposely come to witness this event, the Peace Island Institute, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. You know, I'm from academia, and sometimes I tend to be very iconoclastic and not speak from the perspective of a diplomat. Because having listened to my good sister Louise, she mentioned almost all the initiative taken at the level of the continent. But you know, I recall the days when I was working for the European Union, and I consider myself very fortunate and blessed, coming from a very humble background. Sometimes when I look at my CV, I wonder if I'm the person. And when I used to address some of my students at the university, and they some kind of impressed, I say, you don't have to be impressed. You just have to work hard for it. You know what got me here? My father one day told me, if you are first in your classroom, I will buy you a bicycle. And I was working very hard to get that bicycle, which I never got actually. Even after my PhD, I told him, well, you owe me a bicycle, you know. But that's just to say that, I mean, with hard work, the sky is the limit. And believing in yourself also is very important. And when you look at all the problems happening in Africa, we've followed this video. I will give you something in writing properly, but I just want to speak off the cuff. You see the misconception about Africa. And that is not only particular to people outside Africa. Even within Africa, we do not know ourselves. And that's unfortunately very sad. A few years ago, I had the opportunity to visit South Korea. And we saw a video telling us that in the 60s, South Korea was at the same level with Ghana. And Kenya was ahead of South Korea. But look at the gulf separated South Korea with these countries today. And with all the resources that these countries are endowed with, you ask yourself, what's the question? What's the problem with Africans? So when I was leaving, people asked me, what are you feeling? I say a feeling of admiration, anger, and frustration. I admire South Korea, but I was angry about Africa and frustrated because I know all the resources that we have. But just to say that, you know, my president used to say that the worst virus that we are suffering from in Africa is ignorance. Because you cannot understand the amount of wealth that we have in Africa and the abject poverty in which people are living. It's unacceptable. And when you look at the conflicts in Africa, we all know that the things that are fueling these conflicts are natural resources. And those who are coming to our aid to help us solve the problem cannot love Africans more than themselves. They have interests at stake, and we have to understand that. Remember the conflict in Liberia, when Liberia and Sierra Leone, when they were killing each other. You have a group of mercenaries called Executive Outcomes, protected the diamond fields and taking them somewhere else, whilst Africans were killing each other. But all this problem stems from a very long history where Africans fail to see themselves through their own eyes. I think if Koreans are able to achieve these great things, it's because they believe in themselves. And culture, yes, it's true that they've put a lot of emphasis on science and technology, but culture occupies a pride of place in their development process. Unfortunately, in Africa, we tend to see ourselves through the eyes of others. Others who are only interested in what Conrad would say, tearing the treasures out of the bowels of our land. And you look at even the education system in Africa. Even for us to come with proper curricula, we have to get support from others. Of course, if I give you my money, I will want you to put in your curricula what I want you to put there. In our local languages in Wolof, they say, when you borrow someone's eyes, you look in the direction that he wants you to look at. So the problem stems even from education, the education itself. We have universities, we have schools, but are they really dealing with our development needs? Not really. And a few years ago, I attended a summit in my capacity as foreign minister in Addis Ababa. And we were talking about shared values. Which values are we sharing if we don't even know our own values? I take my own case. It was during my days as a PhD student that I rediscovered myself, that I learned a lot about Africa. You know, they will tell you, Africans, they don't have written history, so they've forgotten most of these things. But that's not true. When they say scripta manent, verba volant, writing remain, and words fly, this is a hypothesis that does not hold water in an African context. Because we devise ways and means where knowledge is hidden. Because in Africa, to get knowledge, you have to deserve it. And we have what we call our griots. Even when they're playing their music, the instruments that they're playing, like the kora, there are a lot of messages hidden in those instruments, in the tunes. And Leopold Sédar Senghor, the former president of Senegal, a great poet, used to say that these are high monuments, oral monuments, surrounded by the wall of silence. Silence that will not allow you to talk about things that will fuel conflicts. And that's why we have the griots. And we used to have our own mechanism of solving problems, finding African solutions to African problems, where the elders play a key role in appeasing a situation, where you have the griots. In traditional Africa, leaders will not just come and speak like this. You have a griot who will play the role of a spin doctor. We know about spin doctor well before Alistair Campbell, who was in Tony Blair's cabinet. You will speak slowly, and the griot will re-echo what you are saying, but in a manner that people will understand it, and in a manner that will not create conflict. We were talking about shared values. Which values are we sharing? If we even fail to know that some of the first texts dealing with human rights emanated from Africa, you have the Fita Neges of Ethiopia. You have the Charter of Kurukan Fugan. The Fita Neges, thank you, sir. That's the basis of the Ethiopian constitution. And when I asked my friend and brother, who is now the current prime minister, about the Fita Neges, even an English translation was not available. He gave me one in Amharic, and he told me they will work on translating it so that we can share it at the continental level. You also have the Charter of Kurugan Fugan in Mali, where you have 44 articles, and where you have the griots in the 43rd article, given the responsibility to make sure that we do not use in an improper way the word, so that conflict can generate conflict. And you know, once you write something like the history, if I decide today to write the history of the Peace Island, for example, I write it, it's documented here. There is no way you can change it. Put in negative things, maybe that will affect the reputation of the Peace Island. I'm just using the Peace Island as an example. But when you say the history of the Peace Island, then you have the possibility to correct some of the misconceptions and some of your subjectivity. And that's why in Africa they prefer using an oral way to transmit their knowledge. And you know, UNESCO said that it's in the minds of people that conflict starts. So it's in the minds of people that we should build fortresses. And in Africa, you have what we call the joking relationship, where when you have a conflict, intra-ethnic or inter-ethnic, you have people like with different surnames. If, like today, Louise is a Kurubali, if I decide to fight with my brother here, and she knows that I'm a Tangara, if she asks me to stop, I don't have any other choice, but I will stop. And sometimes we fail to use those kind of traditional way of dealing with issues. I was discussing with my sister from Nigeria, the ambassador, who is unfortunately not here, a very knowledgeable person. I always enjoy talking to her. There are conflicts. Just ask the women to solve the problem. They will solve it. Yeah. Because in Africa, we fear the fact that our mothers will come and stand naked in front of us. People will drop their guns and run. And that will be the end of the conflict. So these are the kind of things that we need to explore and try to know more about ourselves. And in my capacity also as foreign minister, I remember I was mediating in the conflict in Cote d'Ivoire between President Gbagbo and the other camp. And when you meet each of them, they will say, we are ready to die for this cause. And I always reminded them of the words of the Archbishop of Warsaw, Glemp, who was saying that it's more patriotic to live for your country than to die for your country. So let's try to live for Africa rather than dying for Africa. Africa is a diverse continent. And today, see, everybody is happy saying that this is the decade of Africa. We have a lot of resources. But what are we doing concretely for it to be our decade? The misconception about Africa being an aid-dependent continent, because we created that situation. And as long as people are giving us, we think that we should receive. And I always say that there are things that we should refuse to take because it's not in our best interest. And we organized, during the time I was working with the European Union, we organized a seminar. And for the first time, we decided to invite all the development partners in the country to avoid duplication of efforts and actions. And this old man came. For the first time, we decided to also invite the stakeholders, the farmers and others. And he said, it's a good thing that you are organizing this forum and giving us the floor to express ourselves. Because you are coming with your project. It's your project. going with your projects, but our problems are still the same. That is to say that the bottom-up approach, in fact, that we are talking about is just a fiction. We design things, we think that we know more than others, and unfortunately in the international world, that's the way also things operate. They know that they think that they know more than Africans what obtains in Africa. So they usually come with their ready-made solutions to the problems, but rather than solving the problem, they will put more fuel on it, and then whilst Africans are fighting each other, others will reap the gloomy benefits. I think I will stop here so that I can allow my other colleagues to speak, and then we'll have the opportunity to interact during the question and answer session. Thank you very much.